Welcome to Sales Accelerators, Winning Strategies for Financial Professionals, an educational webinar series that explores the latest tools and concepts to help boost your sales performance and drive business growth. Join us as we analyze trending topics in life insurance, investigate the latest headlines, and discuss solutions to accommodate your clients' unique needs. Please welcome your host, Kurt Fasen, Executive Vice President of Sales and Marketing.
Hello, welcome again to another edition of Sales Accelerators. My name is Kurt Fasen, Executive Vice President here at DBS, and this is the program where you will find out ways to put in action ideas and concepts to improve your sales, your business, and your customers' experience. Now, today's topic, we're going to focus on giving you a better understanding of Index Universal Life and really look at how can we make it simpler. So I've asked my new friend, Kurt Williamson, Brokerage Director of Sales at Mutual of Omaha, to join us. Kurt, welcome to the program.
Thanks, and I'm glad to finally be with somebody that spells their name the correct way.
Same, absolutely. Now, folks, before we start, I want to just remind you once again, as part of your registration, you receive something called your Webinar Action Plan. Now, don't know where it is? That's okay. You can use a sheet of paper if you can't find your action plan. But here's the purpose of it. As we're going through the session today, I want you to jot down names of people, names of clients, names of prospects that might make sense for you to share the information you hear today. Because we know that if you don't put into practice what you learn within 72 hours, it's likely you're not going to. So I'd encourage you to write those names down and follow up with folks. Put some of this sales accelerator into action. All right, let's get started. So Index Universal Life, or I guess IUL, as we like to call it, these are products that provide cash value along with death benefit. And really, these give a great alternative to clients. But as in all things, there are definitely pros and cons that really need to be considered. It can be a little more complicated conversation when you're showing it to your clients. So Kurt, I want to start by talking about the IUL conversation that advisors have, and I think sometimes they overcomplicate parts of it. What do you believe they overcomplicate the most, and why?
Yeah, this is a fun question, and this kind of goes back, and I remember this when I was an agent and advisor 20 some odd years ago, is that you like to feature dump on clients, right? You want to talk and kind of show how knowledgeable you are, thinking that the display of knowledge wins the day. It doesn't. The biggest place that I think advisors in general overcomplicate the IUL is right out of the gate, right? They lean too heavily on illustrations. They feature dump, start chasing rates, which that's a really rough one. Instead of explaining the purpose of the IUL, right? Illustrations are very powerful tools, but when they become the conversation instead of supporting the conversation, I think clients get lost real quickly, right? And rate chasing really makes it overly complex. Complexity is not it's a communication problem. It is not a product problem.
You know, I so agree with you. And you know, my time as an advisor, I remember, you know, especially early on, you would really get going. You're like, oh, let me show all the great things. And I love the way you said it. Rather than having those items, illustrations and features and rates and things like that, support the conversation. You change the tables and make it the conversation. So that's a really good kind of quote, don't do or not to do list. So in your opinion, how should advisors reframe that IUL discussion so that clients really understand the purpose before they get to the mechanics?
And see, and that question right there goes to the crux of it, right? The reframe really starts with the client, not the product. So before you ever talk about mechanics, you got to determine, okay, what's the role of this policy? What is it meant to do? What is it meant to play? What problem are we solving? And where does it fit in the broader plan, right? Typically, IULs are part of a more robust plan for our clients, just not a one and done thing. Something to be very clear about, and I think this is a mistake that is easy to make just because of some of the notoriety that IULs have gotten over the years, is that let's be clear about it, what it is and what it isn't. It is not an investment product, right? It is not an investment account. It is not designed to replace a portfolio. You're not buying a market. It is a life insurance policy, period. No matter how you look at it, whether it's built for accumulation or whether it's built for primarily protection, it is 100% a life insurance policy, right? Now, does it have some tax advantages with accumulation and long-term flexibility and those kind of things? Yeah, and some guardrails along the way, but defining the purpose up front before product makes everything easier to understand, right? IULs compete with risk management. They're not there to compete with the S&P or other indexes.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I mean, really, that gets back to know your customer. Know your customer first, right? Okay, so let's dig just a little bit deeper and talk a little bit about what do you believe is the single most effective way to explain IUL to a client without using a spreadsheet. I mean, a spreadsheet's a great safety tool, but if we don't use that, what do you find most effective?
Well, in full disclosure here, I bring all that stuff with me to a client meeting, so I have it and I can refer to it. But I like to refer to simple analogies rather than an outcome-based language, we'll say. For me, I like terminologies that maybe the bowling alley with the bumpers, right? That is a very good analogy for how to describe why we're doing what we're doing with an IUL. Clients don't need to understand complex formulas. Now, are there some who are more analytical than others that maybe want to? Okay, great. Well, then use the peeling of the onion approach. You start with the outer layer and then you dig deeper into it. But they still need to understand what the policy is designed to do and what it's not designed to do. Focus on outcomes, right? That's what you want to do. Focus on outcomes. Avoid a lot of industry jargon that nobody understands. It's not useful anyway. What I will say about a spreadsheet, if you need a spreadsheet to explaining it, you're probably explaining it too much.
That's a good point. I remember early on, I was referred into a firm, and it was an engineering firm. And I got myself so mired into the spreadsheets that we were working on that I almost lost the sale. And it was when I finally put those away and started talking about the needs the clients had and used, as you said, focus on the outcomes. That's when the real success comes. But part of all of this is illustrations. I mean, that is just part of it. And so I think one of the challenges I've heard is that an IUL illustration just simply confuses a client. And why is that? Maybe we need to look at it differently. How should an advisor actually be using an illustration, and how much technical detail does a client really need? And when do you see those lights go off that say, okay, that's enough? What are the signals or signs that people see?
And honestly, for me, industry wide, I think illustrations can be misused, right? The reason why illustrations confuse clients is because they look precise, right? But they're not promises at all. There's no illustration out there that says this is guaranteed to happen this way. That doesn't exist, right? The minute you design an IUL, it's out the window anyway, because what you just showed your client probably is not going to happen exactly the same way in the ensuing years. They're projections, and you need to treat them that way. Advisors get into trouble when they treat them like forecasts instead of scenarios, right? That's kind of goes back to how you describe these things to the clients. I think I see illustrations primarily to compare approaches and set expectations with the client. I stop once the client understands the range of outcomes. So if the illustration creates more questions than confidence, it's probably time to stop using it.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think you're right. I think a lot of people look at those, and because it's ink on paper and it really looks very real, They believe, well, then in 19 years, this is how this is exactly going to look, and that's because they've lost the perspective. All right, let's go all the way back to the initial conversation when we're trying to identify solutions for a client. What questions should advisors be asking clients before they even think about recommending an IUL?
And this kind of goes back to a lot of trust-based selling, and there's any number of methods out there, right? To develop that sense of trust with a client, you should be asking more questions, right? Not feature dumping, not these things. Before recommending any kind of IUL, advisors need to slow things down with their clients a little bit and ask some fundamental questions. And going back to the foundation and the fundamental questions sets the tone for everything. What problem are we solving? That's one you have to ask. How long does this money need to work? What are we trying to accomplish here? How comfortable is the client with variability along the way? Because let's be honest, sometimes IULs are awesome if the market's doing well, if it's tied to a simple index. But you always hear the term zero's your hero. Well, what the heck does that even mean? All right. That means you're protected from a downside. Okay, you need to define that with your client, right? So they understand, because a lot of that also has to do with how you design your IULs. Good questions simplify the sale before it ever becomes a sale. That's an old adage. It goes back, 30 years when I was first getting started. Be better at the questions and fundamental questions, and go back to, why are we even sitting here? Why are we even sitting together? What problems are we looking to solve? And does an IUL merit a place in here?
Yeah, I think I love that. So there are really three key things that I heard you say. I want to just call them out again. One is, what is the problem that the client wants to solve for? What's their time horizon? How long do they have to solve said problem? And then third, what's their tolerance for risk or variability along the way? Can they handle the ups and downs or not? I think as you as an advisor start understanding that, the annual reviews that you're having, all of that are going to become increasingly more comfortably, because you are with the client every step of the way. All right, so now let's talk about, stay on this theme with simplification and easy to understand. And the next thing comes to my mind is the part that when I first started working with IULs a long time ago, just made my head spin, and that's caps, participation rates, crediting strategies. You talk about industry jargon, and you talk about people that don't live and breathe this every day. That can be overwhelming. So how can an advisor simplify the conversation around those areas?
And this is, for me, working with advisors in the field, this is the one part where we have a real tendency to over explain. We'll take our 4, 5, 10, 12 different indexing strategies and explain all of them to the client. If you do that, at least in my opinion, I would say you're already wrong. You don't need to do that. Why are you going to hurt your client like that? You're just overcomplicating things, and all they're hearing is all this jargon that doesn't make a lot of sense to them. Again, it goes back to, why are we doing what we're doing? All right. This is a part where I think less really is more. Okay. You don't need 5 or 6, 10 strategies to make a point. Pick 1 or 2, explain the trade-offs, and keep it consistent. You should be able to make a recommendation on crediting strategies to a client after you've had the initial conversation and understand kind of what their tolerance is. Clients don't need to win the index. They need to understand how the policy behaves in different market environments. Right. Clarity beats customization every time. Don't give them 10 options. I can't even select 1 out of 10 options. Give me 2 at the most. This is what this one does. This is what this one does. And what I would say is, probably with just about, and I talked to my other carrier partners out there, they have a couple crediting strategies that they use the majority of the time, right? Absolutely. They don't split it. You cannot have 10 crediting strategies and evenly split your business among. You have 1 or 2 that consistently perform well, and that's the ones that's your default, right? That's exactly what you want to utilize. Pick 1 or 2, explain it to your client, explain the trade-offs, keep it consistent.
I'll give you an analogy that popped in my head when you were talking about that, and I so agree. So my wife and I went out to dinner last night to a new place, and they gave us one of these menus that had many pages in it, and that kind of freezes you down a little bit. And then the waiter came back and gave us another document, and it said, "Oh, these are our specials for tonight." And there were 3 things on it, and we both got something off that sheet because it was too overwhelming. There was too much stuff. We're like, geez, I just, but so I think it's, in some small way, it's kind of the same. You can overwhelm your clients by giving them such a plethora of options that they paralyze, they lock down. And if you just focus in and say, let me show you, there are 10 options, there are 12 options, but let me show you these 2. These 2 really, do this, that, and the other thing. I think you will keep it simpler and make the client happier, really, in the end. All right, now let's take this just a little bit closer to the sale, and let's talk about how an advisor can help set realistic expectations in the mind of their client without at the same time killing the client's interest, because they might get scared.
Sure. And this kind of goes back to your initial conversation with the client. You do it by being honest early. Don't use targets. Don't say this is going to return X. Frame ranges is what you want to do with it. That, again, goes against a lot of how I think in this industry we utilize illustrations in general, right? We have this target. It's the non-guaranteed one. It's at 9, 10, 12% or what it is. Don't use that. That's silly. That's not a target, right? Frame ranges as to here's how this should perform, right? When advisors avoid tough conversations early, those will come back to you later. IULs work best when clients understand the durability and the ranges of it, not perfection, right? Once they understand that, things get easier. When expectations are realistic, confidence goes up, sales go up. Honesty never slows sales, right? It prevents disappointment in the future.
I so agree with you. That's absolutely right. I mean, the number of clients that don't understand what's going on because somebody got a little more carried away, if you will, with their sales presentation, rather than just being upfront and honest. You're much better off in that time frame. You hear a lot about this concept of optimizing the sale, and I think that could be one of the big reasons why IUL can feel complicated to clients. Do you agree? And if so, why do you think that is?
It kind of goes back to the whole thing from the beginning conversation with your client and thinking about who is my client? What am I trying to do here? Am I selling an IUL just to sell an IUL because they're the cool thing now? Maybe an IUL is not the right thing for your client to even be in. I mean, there's many times that I've seen where somebody's trying to shove an IUL into something that it doesn't make a lot of sense. Optimization adds fragility to any design that you do. When advisors try to squeeze out every last basis point of an illustration, they sacrifice resilience within it. Clients don't want a perfectly optimized policy. They want one that they can trust through good markets and through bad, right? It kind of goes back to simplicity builds confidence and confidence builds trust. Again, trustworthy or trust-based selling model, right? The best designed policy is one that survives reality. And let's think about this. The minute you do an illustration, you sell it to your client. Hey, they like the idea, they like the concept. How accurate is that illustration going forward? Is it going to perform exactly like it says in there? No, it's not. Never has, never will, because markets do different things and different indices do different things. So again, optimizing the heck out of it really adds fragility to it. And then you have to explain yourself and resell what you did in your yearly conversations. And hopefully, and I'd encourage all my agents and advisors to do this, if you sell an IUL, you better be visiting with your client every year. Hey, where are we at? Is this thing doing what we said it was going to do? Do we need to make some changes or whatever? They need to do that. But be real careful when you start just concentrating on optimizing everything. And it's not necessary, at least in my view.
I agree with you. I totally agree with you. I want to address the folks that are joining us today, either on our podcast or on our webcast, and those that have historically never sold an IUL. And a lot of this that we're talking about today may feel a little bit different for you. Maybe 99% of your business is selling term insurance, or maybe you sell some term insurance and a little bit of whole life, or maybe it's all whole life. How would you simplify the IUL conversation for advisors that are newer to this product set in the market?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it was one that I had to struggle with because I sold a lot of term and a lot of whole life, and then when IULs became a thing, I was reluctant because it sounded like there was just way too many moving parts, and it was overly complex in design. And for me, even to this day, when I hear complex, I think costs. Right? You don't have a whole lot of moving parts in any product, and there not be additional costs. There is, without a doubt. I would anchor those guys to the fundamentals that they already understand, right? Going back to it, IUL, it is life insurance. I don't care how you try to cut it apart and show all these great things that it can do. It is protection first, long-term planning, discipline over shortcuts, right? You have to understand, again, what is it that they're doing? If they already understand life insurance, the IUL is not that big of a jump. It's just breaking it into its smallest pieces and understanding what they do. It isn't magic. It's just a different chassis, right? When you translate concepts, I think, instead of reinventing them, then the confidence comes with that.
I agree. And keep in mind, I'll talk about this a little later, but there are resources for each of you, right? If you're watching this, if you're listening to this and you think, well, this is interesting, I know some other people are using this in their planning, I just don't know. There are resources at DBS, at Mutual of Omaha, elsewhere that we can help connect you to make sure you feel confident when you're having that conversation. Now, speaking of Mutual of Omaha, I'd be remiss if I didn't give you a couple minutes just to talk about Mutual of Omaha and the role and philosophy that the carrier plays in simplifying the IUL story. Maybe you could a little bit talk about that. And how does working with a carrier that thinks in decades, not in sales cycles, simplify the experience?
Yeah, and this is always fun for me because I was a fan of Mutual of Omaha before I ever came to work for Mutual of Omaha. Always liked what they did. I live in the same, I live in Omaha, so of course, the mothership was always here. Carrier philosophy matters more than I think people realize, right? With Mutual of Omaha, we think exactly like a mutual company should. Policyholder first. And our CEO, James Blackledge, takes that to heart. Anytime you talk to him about Mutual of Omaha as a whole, that's the first thing that he says is about our policyholders. And that's super encouraging to hear. But it also, we talk the talk, we walk the walk. What does that mean? Very disciplined financial decisions, a long-term view. When we build products, they're built for decades instead of just simple sales cycles. We utilize a portfolio money approach instead of a new money approach. What has that done for us? That has allowed us to keep our in-force cap integrity in place, whereas maybe you have others that utilize a new money approach and they've had to change their caps on issued business several times over the past few years and even invent new products to kind of move folks into that, which is fine. That's a philosophy. I'm not knocking it. But for me, when you put policy owners first as a mutual company, long-term thinking removes the noise. And that's what I want. I want consistency in what I do with my clients. I do things and my process is the same. And Mutual of Omaha is very much the same way. We think in long-term, not sales cycles.
Absolutely. At DBS, we've had a long history with Mutual of Omaha. And over the last several years, I've gotten better acquainted with not only your products, but your people. And I would agree, the philosophy that I see at senior leadership at Mutual of Omaha is really putting that policyholder first. It's thinking long term. It's how can we make this easier for our policyholders to be successful along the way. All right, Kurt, I'm going to give you one more chance to answer a question, and this one's probably the tip of the iceberg. If you can give advisors just one rule, not 3, 4, one rule to make every IUL conversation simpler, what would that be?
This literally goes with every insurance conversation you have with your clients, not just IULs, but for me, it's specifically for IULs. You set proper expectations from the beginning. That means everything. IULs is a long-term relationship. You're going to do annual reviews, ongoing service. I never gave my clients an option to not meet with me. Whenever I sold them or was working with them on something, it's, hey, at a minimum, my clients meet with me once a year. How often do you want to meet? Some of them wanted to meet every month, some of them every quarter, whatever. But you set the expectations early that at a minimum, we're talking again every year. It does a number of things, right? It makes sure that, especially with an IUL is concerned, that is this thing doing what we want it to be doing? Do we need to change something? Or even maybe move it to something else. I mean, there's so many different options there that you can do. But again, setting the expectations from the very beginning is always key. Always key. Clarity up front creates confidence. And that's an old adage. That's been around for a long time. That goes back to like Dale Carnegie. And I stole that a long time ago. Clarity up front creates confidence. So set expectations from the beginning. That solves a lot of problems for you.
It really does. All right, I'm going to give you a chance to catch your breath. And I'm just going to remind people that are watching. You've been watching and listening, and hopefully now you have a little bit better understanding of IULs, and more importantly, how to make the conversation simpler. Now, as I said earlier, you've got resources. Our case design analysts are here to help to give you more information. In your regions, we have regional sales directors that can step in and help you with opportunities and look at your book of business and help you really take advantage of what you've been learning about today. Our DBS website is full of resources and all sorts of tools to help you. And there's even an IUL series that you can click on and learn even more. Don't forget, the team is here to help you, whether it be from our underwriting team all the way through case management, case design, advanced markets, and beyond. We are here to help you. And we're very pleased to have the opportunity to do that. Kurt, I'll turn it back to you for some final words for our guests.
Yeah, and again, I always appreciate the chance to do these kind of things because, again, when you look at all the noise that's in the market with IULs, going back to the fundamentals of what they are and what it is, and again, and you heard me harp on this several times during the conversation of what is the reason you're thinking about the IUL. It has to start with what problem are you solving before you ever get to product. So your client or people come first before product. Keep that in mind. And second, I'm going to tap the Mutual of Omaha horn again, guys. I think Mutual of Omaha has done a really good job with our, we actually have 4 different IULs, IUL Express, Life Protection Advantage, Income Advantage, and our Professional Advantage product. Those all have a really good place in the market and give you a lot of great options when you're helping your client, without a doubt.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us today. And thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us for another edition of Sales Accelerators. We hope you have a great rest of your week, and we look forward to seeing you again right here for another edition of Sales Accelerators. Take care, everybody.